So welcome. We're really excited to share this project and tasks that are complete, tasks that are in the works, and not only for adult diploma, but also for high school equivalency test prep. I just came out of the high set session, which many of you may have been in, and these tasks are also great for instruction for students who are prepping for the GED, and I assume also for the high set. So today, a little introduction, talking a little bit about the project. Then you're going to hear directly from the writers, and you're going to hear about the tasks. And then we will have time for any other questions, a little bit of a wrap up. So introductions. The writers, you will get to see all of them, but I wanted to call them out here first and foremost. The rest of us are support. They are really the key people in this project. And for math, we have Jen Hellekson from Detroit Lakes, science, Klas from St. Paul Public Schools, Krisi Nielsen doing ELA from Northwest Service Co-op, and Stephanie Sommers from Minneapolis Adult Education. So it's been great because we have writers from smaller programs and larger programs, which I think results in a better project. The support team has been Atlas, Patsy, of course, endlessly supporting all the work that we do. At MDE, Brad and Jody. Jody largely as the person directing the adult diploma. She's been great support during this, and additional support from content area experts. Each task is being vetted by a content area expert. And then the feedback is used to revise. And I'm the project manager. I basically send the emails and just kind of corral everybody, and also format the tasks. So I'm at the bottom of the food chain here. So a little bit about the project. So this project is taking a little bit longer, and some of that, again, as we know, timelines have lengthened out during the pandemic. And also, you know, this fall, as we're all going back to different kinds of programming and being ready to kind of make adjustments in the way that we're doing instruction, depending on how things are going with COVID and in our districts and statewide. So this is still in progress. The original project, which we are still working towards, is 16 culminating adult diploma tasks for use when ABE instruction is the completion option. So if you have students coming in using GED test scores, for example, to satisfy, say, science or social studies, these are to be used when the student is receiving ABE instruction to show mastery of the CCR standards or the competencies, depending on what the subject area is. And the process that we've been following so far is our task writers are developing the drafts. And I keep an eye on them, maybe ask them questions or field their questions. When the task writers feel that they're ready to show a task to a content expert, they do so and receive any feedback. And then revision may take place if there's any feedback to do so. Then they're submitted to me, and I format the tasks. I've created a teacher-facing template and a student-facing template so that all of the tasks will be organized the same way, at least with the directions and how to access the materials. And then with the help of Marisa, we are posting the tasks and materials to the Atlas website, and we'll take a look at that. Some more details. So each task is in a folder in Google Drive, or will be in a folder in Google Drive. There will be a teacher-facing document, which has all the instructions, the standards or competencies clearly called out, information about prerequisite content that students would need in order to attempt the task, and then links to handouts, rubrics, videos, worksheets, any of those materials. There's also a student-facing document that would be something that's given to the student, which has obviously less information, kind of the technical information, but does include a checklist so that the teacher and the student can go ahead and initial and check off and keep track so the student can see that progress as he or she or they are moving through the task. And again, all materials and links are easily accessible. These will be view-only folders, or they are view-only folders, so you will need to make copies of the materials. These tasks are often multi-part tasks with reading, writing, listening, and some of them are interdisciplinary. They are aligned with social studies or science competencies or the CCRS. So the ELA and the math are aligned to the college and career readiness standards, and the social studies and science areas are aligned to competencies we've defined for the diploma, but there's also opportunity to include some CCRS standards in social studies and science, and we'll hear more about that. And again, we have subject matter teachers who are reviewing these. So just a little bit of clarification. These tasks are for assessment of competencies. These are not intended to be instruction. So there is content knowledge that is laid out in each of the tasks as far as what students should have learned or worked with, or what skills they need to have in order to complete these tasks as an assessment of mastery. The prerequisite content would be developed in ABE instruction. And these are opportunities for students to demonstrate mastery. Both the task writers and the subject matter specialists have determined or are determining that the opportunity is here for students to demonstrate mastery of the competency or standard listed to submit for diploma evidence. The really key part here is these tasks are not guaranteed for approval by portfolio reviewers. The student must demonstrate adequate evidence of competency and or standards to submit as portfolio evidence. So clearly the teacher is a big part of that. As the student completes the work, the teacher and the student need to work together to determine when the work is up to what you believe would be passable or considered mastery by the portfolio team. So these are set up, but there's still a lot of local work that needs to be done. As with any other portfolio evidence that is submitted, that you decide when it is ready to go. Much of this content could also be used in HSE instruction. There is no requirement for how to use these tasks or any of the subtasks or materials. You can use them however you would like to use them as a whole, or you may decide, wow, I really like this particular activity that students are doing with a video, and I could use this in another way with instruction in my classroom, or I really like these texts, or I really like this mini project. And none of these tasks is required for students to do. These are not required for the adult diploma. This is a response to a lot of programs asking for some model tasks and also programs asking for more support who perhaps don't have the time to develop extensive instruction and assessments for diploma. And so you are not required to use these tasks. You may have your own that are working great, and these may help you further refine tasks that you have using them as models. So it's just another resource that's available. One point that Jody and I wanted to also make clear is there are other diploma capstone projects on Schoology. And there was a call out to the Adult Diploma Working Group for programs to share capstone projects that they have been using. And we thank the generosity of so many of the Adult Diploma Working Group members and programs who shared, and those are still available on the Schoology group for use. The vetting process in this project is only being applied to the tasks we're talking about today. So when we say we've had a social studies, a science teacher, a math teacher, an English language arts teacher work with each of the task writers, we're talking about these 16 tasks, not the ones, the capstone projects on Schoology weren't vetted by anyone in the Adult Diploma group. That doesn't mean they're not completely usable, but we just wanted to be clear about the difference between those and the tasks we're talking about today. Where to find the tasks? The Atlas website. When we go to the Atlas website, there, and you can see some of you may not have seen our new logo. And there is now a section for adult diploma and high school equivalency. This is an area that is going to grow. We do have plans to migrate some adult diploma resources, forms and things over to Atlas in place or in lieu of Schoology, as we're kind of getting away from Schoology. Within the adult diploma icon here, Marisa has set it up beautifully. So the adult diploma tasks are there. All the science and social studies tasks are posted. We are in the process of posting some ELA tasks, and I'm going to be checking in. Jen has done an enormous amount of work on the math, and so I think that those will be appearing very soon as well. So I'm going to pause here, and thank you, Marisa, for putting that link to find the tasks. And we're going to take a look, because that's the best part of this, is to see and to hear from the task writers about what they're actually doing. So I'm going to start us off here. You're going to hear from each of the task writers. And the first person who's going to talk is Klas. And they have taken on the science and done some really cool things, including a task that's really personalized to Minnesota. And the subject matter reviewers for Chris's tasks have been Sarah Turnbull and Andy Albee. And I'm going to turn it over to Kris.
Thank you, Kristine. Yeah, my name is Klas. My pronouns are they, them. And I am at St. Paul Public Schools, or the Hub Center. And I got to teach GED science all through the pandemic. So I had a lot of inspiration for attacking these tasks that I took directly from my classroom. So yeah, there we go. So the 4 domains for science are physical science, life science, the nature of science and engineering, and then earth and space science. And when I took on these tasks and was thinking about how to design them, a couple things that I really tried to hold close and keep in mind were online and virtual possibilities, because it was still, fully virtual when I was working with my students. And of course, these are designed for students to be able to complete primarily on their own with just teacher check-ins. And so, what better way for students to be able to do this from a distance? And then also, I tried to emphasize student choice. So you'll see in each of these tasks that I give opportunities for students to sort of choose their own adventure in some ways. So the first one, the physical science task, is students create a Rube Goldberg. And some of the virtual tools that I provided were just some like inspiration videos. I tried to find a humorous one. I think I included that OK Go video where they make a Rube Goldberg, and then a commercial for a toy that's also a Rube Goldberg, just to kind of get students mind churning, thinking about what exactly is a Rube Goldberg type of machine. Because this physical science task, they're trying to demonstrate mastery and understanding of energy, types of energy, and transformations. And I think Rube Goldbergs are great for that. It is super hands-on, but also people can use what they have available at home, you know, cardboard toilet paper tubes and masking tape and things like that. So this is a nice one for students who maybe want to be a little more kinesthetic with their learning as well. And then students have the opportunity to do sort of a presentation. They're going to label their Rube Goldberg with the types of energy that's demonstrated, because they need to have 5 components in their machine. So it doesn't have to be super elaborate, right? Just 5 components to accomplish their task. But they do need to be able to identify what kind of energy is being represented, and then the transformations where that energy, type of energy, is being transformed. And then they can give a presentation on that, either I'm in person in class, or they can take a video of their machine. The life science task is an essay. So this is the one that Kristine mentioned is really personal to Minnesota. When I was teaching GED last year, when we got to the evolution unit, I was trying to look for more examples. I think we were talking about invasive species, and I found the website that is linked in this task for rare and endangered species in Minnesota. And so again, student choice, I designed this task so that students could choose which species to take a look at. And so part of this task, they need to explain the concept of evolution and extinction, and then how humans impact natural systems. So they're going to look at this species, look at some impacts on the environment, what adaptations that species has to begin with that are specific to the environment where it's native to, and then how we have sort of impacted as humans, we've impacted that environment. And then ultimately, they sort of make a prediction based on their mastery of the concepts of evolution, whether how well that species is going to continue to survive. Do they think they're going to become more endangered or even extinct in the future? For the nature of science and engineering task, they are going to sort of work through the steps of the scientific method. And I found another website where students can choose from a bunch of different experiments that have already been conducted. So I was thinking about my experience doing like a science fair project and things like that. And there's so many canned experiments out there that I didn't want students to just like buy a kit or find it somewhere online and just do the task of analyzing the experiment, because this one is to master the scientific method, empirical criteria, logical argument, and particularly skeptical review. So after they choose that, they actually start with that analysis piece, and they need to do that next step of saying, okay, this is somebody else's conclusion. What further research or experimentation can be done? Because of course, that's how scientific research continues, is we build on the work of others. And so then that's where their initial hypothesis comes from. And so they use that initial experiment as the inspiration for their new experiment that they're just going to design. I felt like this was a more accessible way for students who, perhaps if they are virtual or at a distance, don't have a lot of equipment available to conduct an experiment at home. They go through the process of designing that experiment instead. And then the last task for Earth and space science, I found a carbon footprint calculator online. So students go through and sort of input information about their own carbon use, fossil fuel use, and then it gives them some recommendations at the end based on what they've put in. And so this one, students are creating a visual presentation at the end. I was kind of picturing that like 3 panel board that you use, but also obviously you could do it in Jamboard or something like that if you're virtual. But here students are explaining aspects of Earth and space changes as they relate to human interaction with global environments. So they're thinking about impacts they personally have made on the Earth through their carbon footprint. They're going to demonstrate that visually in a diagram of the carbon cycle. And then they're also going to sort of make some statements of what they could do differently to reduce their carbon footprint. I wanted to add, I forgot, with the physical science task, I had something that I wanted to say. It'll come back to me and I'll put it in the chat if I remember. It looks like there are some things in the chat. Okay. Yeah. If there are questions, I can answer them. Otherwise, I will pass it off to Kristine.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kristine Nielsen with Northwest Service Co-op, way up here in East Grand Forks, Minnesota. I worked on the ELA tasks. Kristine was my subject, or is my subject matter reviewer. So I've worked on 4 tasks. So for speaking and listening, I have created a rhetorical analysis of a speech. For reading, I am currently working on a close reading of a text. For language, I am doing determining the meaning of unknown and multiple meaning words. And for writing, it is yet to be determined. Go to the next slide. So completed, I broke this into 3 parts because I have some completed, some in progress, and some still percolating. So for the speaking and listening, in my previous life as a K-12 teacher, I was also a speech coach. So me personally, I love a good speech, but I recognize that not everyone wants to get up or give a speech. I knew I wanted to give students a way to meet the standard without having to give a speech. So this task meets the speaking and listening Acre 3 level E competency of evaluating a speaker's point of view, reasoning, and use of evidence and rhetoric, assessing the stance, premises, links among ideas, word choice, points of emphasis, and tone used. So to complete this task, students are first going to complete a worksheet on logos, ethos, and pathos. Gotta love good old Aristotle. Then they're going to choose a speech from American rhetoric that they want to analyze. After picking that speech, they are going to do some research on that speech. So they're going to look up who the speaker was, what the speech was written for, the occasion, who the audience was, the purpose, the subject, the tone. You know, was this supposed to be a solemn speech? Was this supposed to be humorous? What kind of reaction from the audience did the speaker want to get? Once they have that better understanding of the speech and their background for their speech, they're going to begin to examine it for appeals to the logos, ethos, and pathos. Finally, they're going to write a paper analyzing the use of those throughout the speech. And this task also has the potential to meet standards in both writing and language. For the language task, I knew right away that I didn't want this to just be, hey, write a paper and put a semicolon where it belongs. Like, I wanted it to be more than just that. So I decided to focus on Anchor 4 level E competency of determine or clarify the meaning of unknown and multiple meaning words and phrases, choosing flexibly from a range of strategies. So the biggest thing I'm working on right now is it better to have these unknown words come from one longer text or from multiple shorter texts? I have some text picked out. I have some unknown words identified that I want students to work with, but still debating what is the best route to attempt this or to handle this standard. For reading is probably the task I have struggled the most with. You think it would be easy for an English teacher to find a reading task, but I love reading and I have a lot of texts that I like. And it was so hard it has been hard for me. It is hard for me to choose which text I want. I'm also an avid Shakespeare fan. I would love to do something on Shakespeare. I'm going to guess most of our adult diploma students or our high school equivalency diploma students in the state of Minnesota would not want to tackle a Shakespeare task. It's also been hard finding one, would appeal to that wide audience of our students. It also took me a while to figure out which standard I wanted to write a task around. So the way I'm going right now is I'm looking at doing a close reading of a text, focusing on the Reading Anchor 1 level E competency of cite strong and thorough textual evidence to support analysis of what the text says explicitly, as well as inferences drawn from the text. And I say aiming for because this is still very much a work in progress. And, I very much will probably change my mind 20 more times before I finalize it. I am currently looking at tasks on Common Lit or texts on Common Lit and hope to have one picked out soon. Writing, I say, is still percolating. I'm one of those people who has to let things sit in the back of my brain and just simmer and percolate and process for a while before I really come up with something good. And when people think of the writing task, they automatically think of that informational essay, that level E writing sample that everyone needs to have in their portfolio. And I knew that I did not really want to go that direction because very few people actually know how to write well. That's a hard thing to learn. So I knew I didn't want this task to focus on an end project or the end product of an essay. So I've been thinking that I really want to focus on the writing process itself and really dive into that. And what does that process look like? And how do you get that process? And that sounds really good, right? Really logical. We want our students to become better writers. So let's make this task focused on writing better. But then I get this little voice that's in the back of my head that says, but wait, our students also don't know how to evaluate their sources. And how can they write a good essay if they don't even know if they're using good sources for their information? So then I'm kind of having this internal debate. Do I do a task for the writing process, or do I do a task for how to evaluate sources? So that's kind of where I'm at with this writing task, is this internal debate going on in the back of my brain with which way I want to take this. So yeah, that's all I really have on my 4. So I'm going to hand it over to Stephanie to introduce the social studies task.
Okay, thanks, Kriste. My name is Stephanie Sommers, and I got to work on the task for social studies. And my very, very helpful reviewer was John Teratola from Robbinsdale. So in the social studies domain, there are 4 areas: economics, geography, US government and citizenship, and history. And I liked how Kris shared with you some of their process for developing this. And I guess what I kept in mind, because some of my background is in developing contextualized instruction and lessons, was a big part of that contextualization is trying to make the content relevant and timely and helping students to see where they might interact with these ideas in their daily lives. And so for the economics task, I focused on trying to understand the law of supply and demand. And anyone who listens to the news is aware that there are a lot of supply chain issues right now that have been brought on by COVID. And so I think if students are at all keyed into that, I'm hoping that it will be something that they can connect with and understand that when supply is limited, as it is now, it leads to higher prices. For the government and citizenship area, I chose to focus on restoring voting rights for felons, or the debate over restoring voting rights for felons. And I heard this morning the Minnesota Supreme Court, I think, is voting on a case, is going to be hearing a case related to this in the coming days or weeks. So again, trying to keep it relevant, trying to think about where our students might have interacted with some of these ideas. For geography, I focused on push and pull factors that affect human migration. And one of the texts has to do with young migrants from South America, South and Central America, ending up at the Mexico-American border, and sort of trying to humanize a crisis that a lot of people have heard about. And so again, where have students maybe heard about these issues? What might they know about it? What would their point of reference be? And then for the history task, I chose to focus on the conflict over Confederate monuments and monuments being removed, and streets and parks and public places being renamed as we look through history with a different lens. We know that here in Minnesota, we've renamed one of our lakes. We had a statue removed from the state capitol in St. Paul. And so I feel like these are topics that students should have some familiarity with, or that it would be fairly easy for teachers to talk about in a way that is current. I didn't want this to be like, oh, these are things nobody knows about, or these are things we shouldn't care about. So that was really important to me. We can go to the next slide. So the way I tried to design my tasks was to give each task 3 parts with an eye towards them possibly being used in multiple ways. We know that if we think about the GED, the RLA and the social studies are very connected. They rely on the same set of core skills. It's basically, a lot about your reading comprehension, for example. And I thought about these social studies tasks and the ELA domain in a similar way. So I created the task so that students could be given the opportunity to read about these issues, listen to some information about the issues, and then do some writing as sort of a synthesis piece. I think Kristine mentioned earlier, you don't have to do all of the pieces within a task. And so, for example, each of my tasks contains 2 texts, and then each text has a text-dependent question set. So there are, I think, 20 questions that could potentially be used with each task. And I really hope Jody or Kristine will jump in if I misspeak here, but I was sort of thinking, this gives students multiple opportunities to show mastery. And if one of the texts was a little harder for them, they have a second opportunity. So you wouldn't necessarily have to submit both of the question sets. In other words, you wouldn't necessarily have to submit 2 question sets and the listening task and the writing piece. I think it's about thinking about what your student needs to round out his or her portfolio and how you can use these tasks in a way that works for you and your students. So as I already mentioned, the reading for each section has those 2 question sets. Most of the articles, in fact, I think all of the articles that I chose come from News ELA. Then you can practice academic listening skills. So there's some note taking, there's a practice with note taking, there's practice with listening for specific purposes, such as listening for key concepts or main ideas. So for that one, the students write what's called the gist summary, where you're just trying to get down the main idea of something. There's another one where they're kind of evaluating the author's or the speaker's point of view. And the listening material comes from sources like Frontline, National Geographic, the ACLU, and there's a TED Talk in there as well. So I tried to find high quality sources for the listening. And then I kind of thought of the writing task as sort of the most summative task, I guess. After the students have done this reading, they've listened, I tried to present some different perspectives on the topics so that they're not just all about one thing, but they're maybe learning about it from a couple different angles. Then they can do some academic writing. So for the writing tasks, for the economics, they write a business plan. For the government task, they write a letter to an elected official presenting their feelings about whether or not voting rights should be restored for felons. They have an opportunity to write an argument essay for the history task about those Confederate monuments. And then there's a research project, a research writing project for the geography task, in which students can research a group that has come to Minnesota to resettle, and then write about some of the push and pull factors that led to that relocation or migration. And then one thing that I know Kristine has already mentioned that is good to keep in mind is we say these tasks could potentially be used for the ELA domain because it would require the teacher doing additional work. For example, you would have to create you would have to do that text analysis that's required to submit something as ABE coursework in the reading area. We're not providing that text analysis for you. I can say that the questions are robust, but you'll need to make sure that you've done the text analysis and that the students are really careful that they put their answers into their own words, for example, if you wanted to submit that. And then you would also need to be sure that you're doing a careful look at the writing if you wanted to submit that, making sure that it meets that level E standard. And I did provide some rubrics for helping with that, but you would of course need to do additional work as the teacher supervising the students' work. So it comes down to, again, to the fact that the social studies and science domains are aligned to the K-12 high school standards for those areas, but the ELA and the math are aligned to CCRS. So what you'd be looking for in the student work might just be slightly different, I guess. And I think that's all that I wanted to say. And I will pass it on to Jen, who's going to talk to us about the math. Thank you.
Are you able to unmute, Jen? I know it looks like you're working.
I'm
on
trying
it.
to. There, did
There
you get it?
Go.
Okay,
Yep.
good.
Finally
Sorry,
worked.
guys. All right, so I'm Jen Hellekson, and I am out of Detroit Lakes, also way up north. And my subject matter reviewer is Andy Albee, and he's been just wonderful with the reviewing and the suggestions to get these things up and going. So my goal was to create tasks that could be used as evidence in the math domain. And I found this to be really challenging in trying to come up with something that was a one size fits all type of task. Partly because all the curriculum, the different curriculum that we follow, the different instruction we all provide, and the materials we use vary so widely. And how do I get something that we all feel is useful and relevant to what we're doing individually? Some of us have the structured classrooms in the larger areas and in the metro area. Some of us, like we, are almost exclusively a one-room schoolhouse with only occasional structured classes. And then each and every student that walks in comes in with such a different educational background. We have students who walk in we have one right now who never started 9th grade. And then we have others who come in who are only with us because they were a couple credits short. Or, you know, maybe they completed 4 out of the 5 2002 GEDs and they're back. So once we figure out what kind of instruction we have to provide for these students individually, you know, what do we do next? We could do the next slide. Thank you. So I have the 4 different projects. We have number sense, geometry, we have algebra, and then stats and probabilities. And yeah, Kristine, Andy does love math. That's just putting it, mildly. So with the different projects, we set them up. I set them up into, they're all the same, and they all have 2 different sections. So the first section covers the vast majority of the level D standards for that subject area. I originally started with putting all of the standards in, and you know, we're just trying to kind of highlight the instruction, highlight their knowledge, highlight their mastery. So it was pretty cumbersome and a little bit, you know, repetitive in some of the areas. So it covers the vast majority. It gives a nice picture that these people understand, our students understand the level D math concepts. And then the second section covers one CCRS level E standard in detail. So only one is needed. Do you have to provide competency mastery in one level E area? So what we do is after our instruction is complete, then we hand the student the task and they're able to start it. Occasionally a student will just want to sit down and complete that task in one sitting. Or in 2 sittings. But for the vast majority of them, especially students who come in and they only are able to come once a week, once every 2 weeks, or if they have more retention issues, or if they have a lot of math anxiety, we break it up into chunks. So we'll take a chunk of the set level D, let's say the section A, and then we'll provide a review. We'll work in a review in a small group or individually. Then they'll go and complete that section of the task independently. And if we break it down that way, it seems to go really well and smoothly, and it doesn't seem like an overwhelming math test that they're taking. So when it comes to the level E, you guys can see, you can choose to use both sections if you need them both for evidence, or you can choose to just do the level E section if that's all that's needed for that individual student's needs. So an example is that student that I have right now who came in with, had passed all of his, all but one of his 2002 GED math or exams. He'd done the math, and so the completion requirements say he now has to provide mastery in only one level E standard. So for that student, we're doing our instruction and review, but we only need to prove that one level E standard. So currently I have all 4 of them complete. One of them I just realized I hadn't sent to Kristine, so I just emailed that off to her for review. It's already been through Andy and a couple times. And I have 2 more that are in right now being reviewed. And then I have the final one in queue, just waiting to be reviewed as well. So hopefully they'll all be up and on the site shortly. And that's really all I have for you about the math.
I'm honestly, you know, I've been working with these 4 task writers, and I'm kind of totally gobsmacked right now because hearing it all together and hearing directly from the writers and how relevant these tasks are, how much thought has gone into these tasks, the choice, just the not only the knowledge of the content area or the standards, but just the wisdom and experience of working with ABE students. I'm just, I'm really very impressed. Thank you, writers. Yeah, that's about all I can say. And for me to be, to not have a lot to say is kind of remarkable. I'll let that stand where it is. Amy, you have a question. Go ahead.
Actually, I would like Jen to add something. I work with Jen, so I know that there's something she left out in telling about her tasks.
Oh,
I'd like
please.
her to tell, yeah, I'd like her to tell us about the replacement problem concept and when students don't meet the standard on their first attempt.
Oh, that's true. So if the task again was created to be comprehensive so that even if you have a student that, does, so the tasks are made that if you need to complete 80% correct on the level, on the total package, and then 90% correct on the level E. So what do you do if a student doesn't make that 80% overall or the 90? So you have replacement questions that you can either provide on your own that you've made up, or you can use the ones that we have that you can then provide additional instruction and then have them do the replacement problems independently. So you can still use the task. You don't have to throw out the entire thing just because they didn't initially make it, nor do you have to torture them with an entire new task that you're starting from scratch. So.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Amy, for bringing that up. You're very lucky to have Jen up there. Thank you. If you're not looking at the chat box, Laura, thank you for that wonderful comment. It highlights it is another choice. And we all are capable of creating great instruction for our students, but we don't all necessarily have a lot of time. It would be wonderful if we all had time to sit and look at resources and work together and, be inspired to, by each other, and just, a lot of time to be creative. We have all of those characteristics, but we don't necessarily have the time. And so again, it's like anything that I've worked on, like reading skills for today's adults, for example. It's about supporting teachers, and it's about supporting our system and creating more choices. And this has definitely happened and hopefully will benefit teachers and students. So I want to talk just very, very briefly, and you already probably are thinking of ways that you could use these tasks, and definitely the writers talked, some of them talked about different ways to use the tasks, but obviously using these tasks to help a diploma student show competency for the diploma portfolio. That is what these tasks were designed to be an assessment of learning, to show mastery in a particular competency or standard. But also, there's a lot of really good content here that we can use with our GED and future HiSET students. Because as we know, the students will need to have background knowledge in reading and writing and science and social studies and math. So there's a lot here that we can use. To help college prep students practice multiple skills and higher level thinking in content areas. I like the fact that there are multiple skills combined. There's a lot of literacy, for example, combined with a content area, the interdisciplinary nature, I think, and the level that these tasks can be done would be good for our students who are looking to go to college. They're definitely a base to build out more in-depth instruction. So you may be inspired. I often am. I'm one of those people who does better when I see something and can be inspired by it. So you might see some of the texts, the tasks, the projects, and you may decide, okay, I'm going to build out this, unit of instruction to prepare my student or students to do this work. Or you may decide to add additional activities with these. You can use them as is, or again, parts of the task. I could see using these if you have a class that's moving together, that you could do this with a small group of students, an entire class, and of course, certainly individually. And as models, again, as I said, I love to see what other people have created because it usually gets the juices flowing inside of me, and it helps me. Sometimes I need to see what something might need to look like or what it could look like, and that gets me going, developing some of my own things. So you may be inspired by these; they may become models. I want to call out a couple things here. Stephanie saying the collaborative aspect of this work. And, Stephanie is a diploma coordinator in her program in Minneapolis, and she was working on some of these tasks already, but she had the opportunity to work with John Turatola, who gave her feedback and helped her kind of take them to a different level. And Laura says it really highlights the team collaboration and unifying programs. And I wish we had more time to do this. And Jen and Andy's relationship working together. And, even working with Kristine, for example, there was a worksheet that she loved and she couldn't find it. And she didn't know what to do because she wanted to use it as part of the rhetorical analysis. And I happen to have it saved because I've used it in the past. And so we're able to use that great resource. And I had so much fun looking through Chris's science tasks. I've taught science in the past. I taught science for 10 years in an alternative high school, environmental and forensic science. And it was just really, really fun to get back into some of the concepts. And again, to see the choice that students have. So thank you for all your comments. I am going to open it up here to any questions that anyone has. I know we have just a few minutes for any questions for any of the task writers, questions for Jody about the process with the diploma reviewers or me. I think everything just is amazingly wonderful. But we do definitely want feedback. So as you're working with these tasks, if there are things that you notice, some errors that we've made, or some questions that you have about the way things are laid out, please contact me. We definitely, as these are used for real in the field, we want your feedback on them. And the question, will these slides be made available? Yes, they are already in the participant folder. And thank you, Astrid. Again, it's coordinating is easy when you're coordinating talented people. So it's been my pleasure, and I will still be working on this, getting those math tasks up. I know Kristine and I are meeting next week to talk through a few more things, and we'll get those up as quickly as we can.
Hey, Kristine, this is Jody. Just a quick comment that I wanted to come on quick and introduce myself. So in case anybody's like, why does she keep talking about Jody? So I'm Jody, and I work at the Department of Ed, and I kind of oversee the review process for standard adult diploma portfolios. And so I just want to give a shout out to all of these task writers who have like added a ton of value here, because we constantly get questions about, what materials can we use? What things can we use with students? What can we put in portfolios that will be really solid evidence? So I'm just really grateful for Kristine for spearheading this project, and to all 4 of these task writers that you heard from today for producing some stuff that's going to be really valuable for folks all across the state. So kudos to everybody involved.
Thanks for introducing yourself, Jody. And thank you to Jody, who fields, questions such as, which competencies exactly are we targeting again? So Jody is great. And again, our experts who've had a lot of fun through this process as well. Just as a reminder, the next session starts at 12:30. We have a half an hour lunch, and Marisa has been kind enough to post the event flyer with the Zoom links. So you are ready to join the next set of sessions. There are 2 flyer Zoom links. In case the first one doesn't work, go ahead and make sure you try the second one, because we do have several hundred people attending today accessing these links. Thanks everyone so much for joining us today, and keep your eye on the Atlas website, because we will be posting more great tasks.